Welcome back to the booth. This is the Teradek News Shooter live show from the Vitech booth, and our next little segment is going to be a discussion with two very well-credentialed gentlemen, Glen Mulcahy from RTE and Elliot Smith, my former colleague at The Guardian, now of how do you put it?
Happen Digital.
I can't say it. Happen Digital. And basically we're going to talk about where the news industry is going in the online space. Is there a future for anybody? Obviously we're newsshooter.com. Everybody who watches us or reads our blog has some interest in this, hopefully. I want to start over actually with Elliot,
sure.
If that's okay. Newspapers and video, that's been going on for a very long time now. Everybody thought it was the great big pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Is it?
Well, this is the great big pot of gold at the end of very rapidly declining CPM rates, ad rates. So I think what's really interesting about it is that actually, we were doing it kind of, maybe 10 years ago, and still, really people haven't decided what video is for a newspaper, which they're text-based organisations, and that's still the primary kind of mode of communication there. So I mean, you can see it either way. Either it's a terrible shame, or it's a massive opportunity still for someone to kind of really kind of go in and define that space.
Is anybody actually making money? Other newspapers that you know of that are actually making money out of video?
Well, not out of news reporting video. I think that's the thing. I think there's potentially a lot of money in kind of branded content.
So yeah, we can go there. Branded content.
Yeah, basically okay. Advertorial. But aside from the odd kind of really breakout viral success, the level of viewership of newspaper video is at a level where you're still pretty much being subsidised by the parent organisation, which you can see it both ways, can't you? You can say, well, we're a digital organisation now, we have to play in that space, or you can say, oh, well, is video the way that we were doing it, or the way that I was doing it, necessarily the right way? So I would do a news feature. That was primarily what I was doing at The Guardian. One-man band going off, and you're sort of in a very uncomfortable space because you're in the worst possible worlds, right? So you need to...
Because I mean, when you were at The Guardian, you were doing like a lot of newspapers trying to, essentially they would take Reuters or AP, put that up, but they'd also try and do elements of breaking news or hard news, and then an awful lot of features.
Lots and lots of features.
And now more and more branded content. So... do you think anybody's making a really good go of challenging the established broadcasters for hard news?
Hard news is just tough. It's just really tough. I mean, obviously you've got Vice sending...
Well, okay, we were going to get there, so that's...
Yeah. So you've got Vice sending people with kind of good equipment to dangerous places, making kind of experiential films of actually what's happening in the world. But even for The Guardian's a decent-sized organisation, but even for an organisation of that size, competing on breaking news is in video. It's a mug's game, because you haven't got a satellite truck, you haven't got the infrastructure really to take live feeds properly yet, and so when there's people out there like the PA, like the Press Association, which is in the UK, that they do a kind of a nationwide feed.
News agency.
Exactly, that's the word I'm struggling for. And then internationally you've got the AP and Reuters feeds. It's very hard to justify going out and chasing hard news.
But then you've got Vice,
post,
who are now the most well capitalised and probably, actually, net worth probably more than organisations like The Guardian. Making a go of it by going out there and doing something that is live, that is breaking, but it's in a different, packaged a different way and presented a different way.
And I think we were talking about this before. I think that what they've done is they've avoided the middle. So they do, they're high end, right? So they've gone to that place and thought, well, what can differentiate ourselves? Go to places that no one else will go to, and make really high end kind of but
actually, let's say it's not exclusively high. I mean, it's interesting. They have a mix, and we'll go to it sort of ties into where we're going to go. They do a mix of pre-produced high end, and then you've got guys like Tim Pool running around with live or sort of lo-fi. Live or live-ish broadcasting, which supplements the high-end product.
But what they don't have is someone like me at The Guardian, sort of doing stuff in the middle, running around with a kind of a mid-size camera, a mid-size tripod, a mid-size everything, trying to do a kind of a mid-size job, and frankly, not even getting a mid-size audience for it, which is where
now you're basically consulting, and you're going to look at other news organisations and what they've been up to. I think you've recently been in Asia looking at some. I mean, what's the sort of global picture? What's going on out there?
You know what? It's kind of similar. Like, you've got, say, someone like the New York Times. They're doing very high-end, really beautiful work, but they're behind a paywall for their text, so they clearly think there's a strategy for that. But the video, they're clearly still looking for an audience. They're still clearly wanting to give that content away to drag people in. So they have an inventory of beautiful, beautiful op-doc films, which are just, as a work of craft, they're beautiful, but financially, is that sustainable?
Have we got any idea what sort of audience figure these videos, The Guardian, New York Times, Washington Post, what's a good hit rate from one of those videos? I'm not going to ask you specifically about things that you might not be allowed to divulge, but
I think they're an order of magnitude off of being where they need to be to make it a profitable kind of enterprise. So you look at a popular YouTube clip, right? That'll do 1 million, 10 million. That's a very, very unusual level of traffic to a newspaper video website. Even with the kind of the big news events so we were in Malaysia, and even with the big news events that were going around surrounding the two horrific Malaysian Airlines incidents, they weren't seeing that level of traffic to their news content, and you just think, wow, if maybe you should just cut out that middle and go high end at one end, and then go.
Okay, well, so
go Glen.
So you're actually then you're coming in from the other perspective, from a broadcast perspective, moving into the online space, and then interestingly, not doing it by simply just taking your ENG camera and a satellite truck and then taking that content and plonking it online. Your approach for domination of the online space certainly in Ireland, at least if not globally, has been different. Can you explain where you're going and what your thinking is on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple of common threads here. I suppose one of these is that we looked at this idea of the self-shooter video journalist back in 2000. It was relatively new back then, and we had limited impact, if I'm perfectly honest. That's part to do with the usual issues. You get some resistance from unions. Management aren't entirely sure what the cost benefits of it are potentially. So that evolved over the last 10 years. But one issue that we constantly had is we can't afford to spend 15,000 euros just, let's buy 20 of those and give them out to people at random. So at one point we had to do a financial analysis and say, what return are we actually getting on the investment that we spent on this? And this came roughly around the same time that the iPhone 4 had kind of got some hold in the market, and there were some accessories starting to come out. So purely by chance, not because of some great strategy, we started to experiment with the iPhone 4 initially, and by the time we got to the 4S, we'd kind of come up with
and was that initially for online content, or was that, were you, and then, I mean, are you using it now for broadcast as well? Or?
Yeah, well, yes, the original plan was to try it out and see what content, what could we create with this and what would it bring as a benefit, because the journalists were lobbying to get these phones. These are the old little Nokia dumb phones, and we kind of went, okay, we'll give you 700 euros worth of phone, but we need something back. And initially the focus was, let's get photos for online, let's get to improve the social media social media presence, and then also let's look at what else we can do with them. So initially it was really focused on online, but as the cameras got better, by the time we got to the 5.5S, we actually realized that we're down converting our big 50-60 grand ENG cameras to SD, and yet we're actually effectively creating high definition footage, which we also have to down convert from the phones. And I'm not saying that they're comparable, okay? I'm not, it's a push bike versus a Ferrari, let's call it spade a spade, but at the end of the day, every one of our journalists has one. So we just put the emphasis on the idea of trying to train them all to an entry-level video journalist skill, where they would be able to get usable pictures from the minute they take it out of their pocket. And then we augmented that with the people who are interested in actually pushing it further by giving them accessories that would allow them to really, leverage the best possible standards out of it.
But do you see yourself now as competing with all this footage shot with iPhones and big cameras, with people like The Guardian or the New York Times, or do you view yourself as being part of in a battle with non-broadcast media, or do you think that the two are still kind of separate and never the twain shall meet?
You know, I have to be honest with you. Like, again, full disclosure, like I've trained a lot of staff in RT, but they've allowed me to train externally. And one of the surprises they did is they let me train one of the main newspapers in the country who would be seen as a competitor. Okay?
Really?
Yeah. So you look at that and you kind of go, how does that work? But let's not go too far off topic. To go back to your point, right? The consensus kind of thing is that they're all grappling and struggling with pretty much the same issues. So the lines that used to very clearly delineate broadcasters from radio stations and radio stations from web and web from newspapers, they're all but gone. You know, every radio station I know is using cameras in their studios now to stream their programs live. Not necessarily trying to replicate a TV show, but nonetheless having an online presence. But for me, the thing that I kind of, and I say this whenever I do training for non-broadcasters, don't fall into the trap of assuming that the model that you need to replicate is what the broadcasters are doing. Because in fact, there's room to experiment, there's room to try new things, and there's rooms to explore new ways of storytelling. And the other thing is, this came up at the Future News session on Wednesday. This idea of a story arc is something that news organizations I don't think have really bought into yet. But you know, from the morning, when you know what your story is going to be for the day, you should be leveraging the audience via social and kind of interacting with them, as opposed to just going for the big bang at your evening news bulletin and, you know, expecting it's going to be a big reveal anymore. I mean, in this day and age, by the time you get to the 6 o'clock news, you're given 1 minute 45 that reaffirms everything else the audience knows from social for the rest of the day. So, you know, what we're trying to do is experiment with those storytelling forms. And I think the newspapers, the advice I gave them, this goes back to the Vice model, is try and not replicate it, try and reinvent it.
I mean, you know, Vice are probably the people who have tried the story arc more than anybody else, use it all the time, and it works for them, we think anyway, at the moment. The audience seem to be responding. Certainly young people tend to, well, actually, even not just young people, you know, hardened hacks like myself sit there and,
me also,
you know, watch a Vice video from start to finish, and that's actually quite a tall order. As we all know, you know, a lot of people will start watching a video because they like what they read in the headline, it looks attractive, but after a minute they'll have lost interest and clicked away.
So, you know, depressingly, one of the key metrics is did someone get 70% way through your videos? Like, they didn't even stay to the end, and that's something that we want to measure. So it's tough.
Yeah, no, it really is. That's again, there's that question about whether, you know, newspaper websites should try and fit to this convention of the 1 minute package, because that's the majority of your audience will click through for that. But again, I kind of tasked them and said, if you're going to do breaking story in the day, fine. In fact, why don't you just try and get it out on Vine to begin with? Then you can do a 1 minute cut. Yeah. And if there's enough content or enough extra stuff, put it online. There's no cutting room floor anymore. You know, I mean, if the audience wants it, this is the Kevin Spacey line. TV Edinburgh Festival last year. If the audience want it, give it to them, wherever,
Absolutely.
Whenever, however. I think that's the mantra we need to start looking at.
No, it's interesting. You know, large broadcasters now are beginning to take, you know, outcuts from interviews, or, you know, the whole interview that went over, and sticking that up online because they can, next to the edited package that has some pretty pictures and the graphic and a presenter talking them through. Why nobody thought of doing that before, I really don't know. It's the most obvious thing on the planet.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
You know, something certainly we've been banging on about forever in terms of newspaper video. I have to say that I now don't work in newspaper video, so maybe that's an indication of where the industry is going. I don't know. What advice do you have for sort of young aspiring journalists looking at how they're creating their content? And, you know, given that you have all these technologies, you've got iPhones, you've got DSLRs, you've got 5Ds, you've got C100s and C300s, you know, what are the key things that you tell people when you're doing your training?
I was in London last week doing a training course, and one journalist cornered me at one point and said, you know, I'm just starting out my career. What advice would you have for me? How do I get into TV? And my answer was, don't.
Yes.
Okay, that's it. It's as simple as that. If you're premising your entire career on the idea that you're going to get a career in television right now, you're effectively wasting your time.
There won't be a television by the time.
Trust me, I've had a couple of very interesting late night conversations about this topic over the last 2 days, but actually I agree with you. I think it will be, just as everyone's been predicting the demise of newspapers, I think television may have peaked, and I think it's going to be a very slow, drawn out, protracted, gradual demise as well. I'm about to get fired by RT probably, but there you go. But the inverse thing about it though is, my ultimate advice to him was, whatever budget you have, buy the best possible gear you can, but focus on becoming the best storyteller that you can possibly be. And if you have a good social profile, and if people start to actually, one, enjoy your stories, your style, your personality, because these are all parts of that whole storytelling experience, you will build a following. You won't necessarily need the brand to verify who you are or what you do. So that's what I said to him. Go and learn. invest in training. Gratuitous plug. Invest in training for both of us. Invest in training. Buy the best gear that you can afford. And even though I'm always associated with iPhone, if you can buy a DSLR like the 5D Mark II or 3 and the rest of the kit that goes with that, go for it. Buy the best you can.
What would you say? I mean, in your experience, is that good advice?
Yeah, well, I'd say key bit of advice: film it like that, right?
Keep it steady. We go through
Buy a tripod.
Yeah.
No, but it's storytelling. It's the storytelling thing the thing that would if you were going to hire somebody to work for you at a newspaper, is that what you'd be looking for, or do you want to know how good they are?
I want someone who will work well in the team, because I think that the big difference for me between doing a text story and doing something, even with one of these, is that you need a support system. If you're going to hand this off to an editor, you need to be able to kind of talk to them and communicate to them, what's the key elements of the story and where is it? Is it on this hard drive? Is it on your computer? And then if you start to work with kind of more people, you need to be able to be a team player. I think that's really, really important, because I think you see too many people as journalists who are very self-contained, and then try and move into this either as a presenter or shooting, and then it falls apart slightly because they're so used to having what they think of as control. Whereas do you see it the other way as well? Do you see a lot of very talented visual people coming in and actually not able to tell a story? Is that a common sort of thing you would say, or do you think that there's?
I don't want to be disparaging of university training or whatever, but one of the biggest risks we have is someone who comes out of college who believes that they're already a fully fledged journalist, and in fact what they've done is they've either spent all their time learning the journalism and know nothing about any of the technology involved, or else you get people who are media students who come in who want to be a journalist who know all about the gear and know nothing about storytelling. So I mean, really it's kind of understand, again, for me the core really is to try and tell the best story. Find the tools that allow you to do that, but find the best story.
What I think is one of the more interesting things is a lot of your I've been following your stuff on Twitter, and a lot of things you tweet out that are really nicely done on iPhone are actually done by people who were or are broadcast journalists of long standing.
Yes.
And so there is actually hope, I think, for the older generation like myself who've been around and hopefully know a thing or two about a news story and how to package it and everything else. And it doesn't really matter what tools that we are using. Hopefully I could tell a story with an iPhone as well as I can with the C300 or Alexa or whatever else. Elliot, where do you sit on the TV debate? Do you think it's dying? Do you think it's going to be replaced by newspapers? Is that possible?
In my dreams, no. I don't think. I think that there's clearly just transformation happening across the industry, right? And I think, I bought a new TV shortly before coming out here. You switch it on and suddenly, you've got apps that you can just go straight to iPlayer, straight to the digital offerings from all the major broadcasters, straight to digital offerings from individual films. And that's right in the living room, right exactly where you want to be to really connect with a kind of a massive audience. So I'm not sure if that's necessarily kind of the right tech for now for newspapers, but for TV it just seems like a no-brainer. Like, why would you not as a consumer do that? I was catching up with a show called Phone Shop that I missed. You can watch it, all 6 episodes, one after the other. It's got ad supported, so it's it's earning them money, but it's also very convenient for me, and I don't have to schedule my life around the TV anymore. So I've got a small child, so that's that's become very those moments of peace and quiet are kind of few and far between.
Yeah, it's not really linear anymore, is it?
No, absolutely. No.
Okay, well I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about gadgets, because this is a gadget show.
And you are Dan Chung.
And so we've talked about the theory and what we're trying to achieve and what we want young folk to do coming into the industry. What tools are you advocating that they're...
advocating.
I mean this, you gotta love
I gotta get a Twitter shot.
Oh yeah, it's actually my first time with a glass.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, it's hard to come by in China.
Okay, tilt it just over that way just a tad. We'll get a shot of this, Dan, with glass.
Okay, so, I mean, is this a viable news gathering tool?
So I've done some experimenting with it since I got it, and I would say that it has potential, but as it is in its current form, it also has quite a few drawbacks. I really have to kind of call it out. The reality is that it's a 720p camera. Yeah, I think we all probably know the specs at this stage. The voice command things are effective until the person beside you knows how to use the commands as well. Because it does not, I'm not kidding you. I had it on 2 or 3 times, and there was a guy behind me just going, "Take a photograph." I was like, I literally wanted to lamp him. So yeah, I've tried to shoot interviews with it. You know, you have immediate issues like, 1, the person looks at you, so now they're doing a direct interview to the audience. 2, the audio microphone in here picks me up great. It does not, even at this range, it wouldn't pick up you up to usable. So you have to use something like an iPhone with a Rode SmartLav, for instance, for the guest to try and get usable audio and sync afterwards, which then brings me back to, well, then would you not just kind of use the phone in the first place, because you can do so much more with it. But I do think it's the first generation of a series of devices that are going to get very, very interesting. So I don't know if you know the Meta Pro, you know, these ones that actually look like kind of Ray-Ban sunglasses. What they're doing is quite a lot more radical than what this is targeted so far.
But I mean, the idea of having a camera on your head, you know, eye-worn, or eyewear, or over-the-ear wear, I mean, is that where we're all going to be in a few years' time, do you think, or?
You know,
crystal ball?
The privacy stuff is lots of people kind of dismissing. Oh, you know, it's nothing to worry about. I can't see why Google couldn't have put a little tiny red tally light on the front of the bloody thing to make everyone go, at least I know it's on. You know, so that's that issue gone away. It can't be that technically difficult. But actually, the privacy stuff that I'm interested in is there is a little tiny eyeball tracking camera in here.
Is there? Really?
Yeah,
What, here?
There is, yeah. And it's tiny. It's just a dot. You can only barely see it. It's in this little groove in here. Right? I'll try and tilt it. And it can detect where your eye is, because if I blink, I can take a photograph. Yeah. So if I see a very nice lady on one of the stands here around IBC, it's like, nice wink, and there we have a photograph of her unbeknownst to her. I sound like a perv now. I should stop. But the point about it is, the point.
Yeah, stop. Please
okay,
stop.
Okay, sorry. The point about it is that, you know, yeah. I can't see people all necessarily walking around with cameras in their heads, because you do feel like a wally when you have it on. It's the truth. Like, I haven't worn it in public because I just can't bring myself to do it, actually, to be honest.
Okay, so iPhones. I mean, what's this?
Oh yeah. So you know, for the last while, I'm sure when both of you gentlemen started out way back as video journalists, you might have done the Michael Rosenblum School of Training, which was, you know, kind of all dynamic and shots and everything else. And the VJ
Sadly,
cameras.
I didn't, but we know of.
Yeah. Legend that is, Michael. But the point about it is, what this lets me do, if I turn it on even, is it lets me stabilize the phone. So it uses exactly the same technology. Please don't look at my Twitter stream. I'll just put the camera on. That could be fun. So it does exactly the same thing as these gimbals that work underneath UAVs to stabilize the cameras. So if you look, I don't know if you can see this, but as I move my hand around, it will basically kind of keep the phone stabilized. And I've seen at least 3 or 4 of these at the conference, so it kind of suggests that maybe this technology
Yeah, we've seen quite a lot of it. It's coming, right?
Yeah.
The only question is whether that comes quicker than just having it all in the phone to start off with.
Well, there you go. The old iPhone 6, will we bite that cherry? I don't know. But nonetheless, optical image stabilization in the 6 Plus might make this redundant before it's even got a start. I don't know.
Does the iPhone 6 offer anything really new for video journalists, as far as you can see?
You know, I know Apple are really promoting the fact that it's got this new DSLR-like focus feature, but I still think, why could they not have just bumped from 8 to 10 megapixels even? There must be some logical reason why they decided to. I hope it's not obstinacy, generally. I mean, the beauty of these is the amount of apps that you can get, the pro-grade apps that you can get for them. You can do so much just on the device. I mean, I've come from 4 stands today where there are different vendors looking at live streaming from these devices. Guys from Sky News Tech actually were demoing it on Wednesday here. And I mean, this is stuff that, you know, the broadcasters are doing it, but why can't the TV stations adopt this technology, or the newspapers or radio stations adopt this technology?
Well, what's funny is that actually you would have thought the newspapers would be the #1 adopters of this technology.
Yeah, exactly.
And oddly, they're the ones you see running around with C100s and handy cams and EX1s. So then it's the broadcasters you see running around with the iPhones.
The problem that we've always had when using these is, you know, I've done basic training sessions on iPhones for a lot of people now, and they're like, yeah, they get it, and you know, they can come back and have great footage, and actually, you know, they'll get the idea of sequences even, and you know, have nice stuff on the phone. How do you get it off the phone? You know, back to the newsroom. That's the thing that we've really struggled with, both here and abroad when we've gone to other places. And I think 4G is going to help massively.
Yeah, already.
But when? Like, and then you have to have the right network or with the right network provider. So, a couple of years' time, you know. Maybe that would be great, you know.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. So you have a leveling technology, but the people who are making best use of it at the moment, as far as I can see, are broadcasters.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they've got the infrastructure to support
not the people
getting it
who
back. back in.
Will stand the most to gain by the levelling technology, which are the people who haven't got the huge budgets and the sack trucks and everything else, which are the newspapers. So I don't get why.
As two freelance gentlemen with oodles of experience in the industry, coming from the visual journalism and the newspaper side, the one thing I would say to both of you, and I've said this to a couple of newspapers, and these are informal conversations, but so TV stations, they come in, they see the studio, and they go, oh my God, it's awesome, look at all the lights, big cameras, blah, blah, blah. And then when the newspaper decides that they want to try and capitalize on talking head, cheap TV in their building, they go, we're going to build a TV studio. And then they go out to a vendor or an installer who will build them a TV studio and charge them and almost bankrupt them to put a TV studio in the newspaper building. And it's an act of criminal insanity. Yeah. I mean, in this day and age, with what you can do with small little consumer devices for an online audience that is literally a little tiny web portal, like, it's just crazy to approach it that way. So there's a huge knowledge gap in newspapers where if they're led astray, they're just going to emulate TV stations, which is the wrong thing to do. Like, you know, train up your staff photographers to be able to shoot video with bloody good DSLRs. Train up all the rest of your journalists to be able to actually shoot with the phone. Photographs at best, but let's try and move into the video space and do short form, medium form, and then buy a couple of C300s or whatever to do your long form stuff.
Elliot, would you agree with that? So the content split, the mixture between iPhones and nice DSLRs or C300 footage, how does that?
I think what can be different? Yeah, I think that's a perfectly sane kind of strategy for.
But is it the right strategy, or should we all be doing something completely different?
Let's open a book and start taking bets, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I think with there is obviously talent in those buildings, and it's about kind of unlocking that talent and making the most of it. I think that what has been very eye-opening about going freelance and working with people outside these organisations is that, you know, once you're working with people who want to be on camera, that makes the whole process so much easier. So you're not kind of trying to persuade a print journalist to kind of get there and do a report. You've got someone who's young, maybe who's hungry, and who, you know, will work with you as a, you know, this is what I was saying, as a team player, you know, to make the best package they can. I don't really care what something's shot on. Like, you know, I think that the technology that we've got access to now, you know, I've only been doing this for 10 years, but, you know, in the space of that time, how much has everything changed?
Yeah, you're a veritable old guy now in the new media.
He's aged well, hasn't he, actually?
I think we have to stop calling it new media, because it's not very new anymore, is it? It's just media, actually.
Yeah.
Bottom line. Yeah. Okay, on that note, I'm going to thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
If people want to follow the discussion more, I actually strongly recommend Twitter. You can't get him off it, that's for sure.
That's true, yeah.
What's your Twitter handle?
At Glen Mulcahy.
Okay, do you want to spell that for those of us who can't understand Irish?
GlenBMulcahy.
And Elliot, are you?
I'm very much on Twitter at Elliot Smith, and not the sadly deceased American singer-songwriter.
Okay, the other Elliot Smith. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and we will be back later on today again with more guests on our News Shooter live show. But for now, thank you very much.